The champagne glass slipped from Patricia Kim's manicured fingers, shattering against the marble floor of her Plano estate as my words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Streamline AI just went public this morning. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. We're valued at $8 billion. Her face drained of color so quickly I thought, she might actually faint right there in front of her perfectly arranged holiday dinner table. The woman who had spent 3 years telling everyone I was just a computer girl playing with gadgets now stared at me with the kind of shock reserved for witnessing miracles or catastrophes. My husband David rushed to steady his mother, but I could see the wheels turning behind his eyes too. The stock options he'd dismissed as monopoly money when I'd tried explaining them years ago suddenly held very real weight. $22 million worth of weight, to be exact. Not that. He knew the precise number yet. That revelation was still coming. My name is Jessica Rodriguez, and 6 months ago I was still being introduced at Kim family gatherings as David's wife who works with computers. The condescension in Patricia's voice whenever she said those words could have powered half of Austin's tech district. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that this computer girl had been quietly building one of the most revolutionary workflow automation platforms the business world had ever seen. Streamline AI started in my cramped apartment bedroom in East Austin 3.5 years ago. While David climbed the corporate ladder at his family's real estate development firm, Kim Properties, I spent my nights and weekends coding solutions to problems that plagued every mid-sized business in America: inefficient workflows, redundant processes, communication breakdowns that cost companies millions annually. I saw patterns where others saw chaos, and I built algorithms that could learn, adapt, and optimize faster than any human team. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was solving efficiency problems for other companies while living in the most inefficient family dynamic imaginable. Every Sunday dinner at the Kim estate in Plano became an exercise in diplomatic endurance. Patricia would hold court at the head of her dining room table, regaling guests with stories of David's latest achievements at Kim Properties, while I sat quietly, my contributions to any conversation either ignored or redirected back to more appropriate topics for women. "Jessica, dear, how's your little computer hobby going?" she'd ask with that practiced smile that never reached her eyes. When I'd try to explain the technical challenges I was solving or the clients I was acquiring, her attention would visibly drift. "That's nice, honey. David, tell everyone about the Riverside Development Project." David, to his credit, would sometimes attempt to steer conversations back to include me, but his efforts were half-hearted at best. He'd grown up in this environment where women were expected to be supportive accessories to men's ambitions, and breaking those patterns required more courage than he possessed. "Mom, you should really listen to what Jessica's building. It's actually pretty impressive," he'd say, but then immediately yield the floor when Patricia launched into another monologue about real estate markets or their family's philanthropic endeavors. The Kim family wealth was old money, disguised as new money. Robert Kim, David's father, had inherited a modest real estate portfolio from his own father and grown it into a multi-million-dollar empire across Texas. They lived in a sprawling estate that Patricia had decorated with the kind of ostentatious taste that screamed affluence to anyone within a 5-mile radius. Original artwork that she'd purchased not for aesthetic appreciation, but for investment value adorned the walls. Fresh flowers flown in weekly from exclusive vendors filled every room. The kitchen featured appliances that cost more than most. People's cars, though Patricia rarely cooked, preferring to employ a rotating staff of caterers for their frequent entertaining. Patricia Kim was the quintessential real estate mogul's wife. She sat on the boards of 3 different charity organizations, not out of genuine philanthropic passion, but because it provided the social connections that benefited Robert's business dealings. Her days were filled with committee meetings, fundraising, galas, and networking lunches where she cultivated relationships with other wealthy wives who could influence their husbands' investment decisions. She viewed every relationship through the lens of social utility, and I represented a significant downgrade in her son's social standing. When David first brought me home to meet his parents 2 years into our relationship, Patricia's disappointment was palpable. She'd been hoping he would marry someone from their social circle, preferably the daughter of another prominent business family. Instead, he'd fallen for a first-generation Mexican-American woman who worked in technology and drove a 10-year-old Honda Civic. The contrast between my practical approach to life and their conspicuous consumption highlighted everything Patricia found threatening about my presence in their family. "Where did you go to school, dear?" had been one of her first questions, delivered with the kind of tone that suggested she already knew the answer wouldn't meet her standards. When I mentioned my computer science degree from UT Austin, earned while working 2 part-time jobs to pay for tuition, she'd nodded politely before changing the subject to David's MBA from Northwestern, which his parents had fully funded. The microaggressions were constant, but subtle enough that calling them out would have made me look oversensitive. Comments about my interesting fashion choices when I wore clothing from Target instead of designer brands. Surprised that I could discuss wine when they assumed I only drank beer. Backhanded compliments about how articulate I was, as if my ability to speak intelligently was somehow unexpected given my background. David's sister Amanda was perhaps the worst of all. 2 years older than David and married to an investment banker named Thomas Walsh, she'd mastered the art of the poisonous compliment. "It's so refreshing that David found someone so authentic," she'd say, making authentic sound like a consolation prize. When I'd mention work challenges or technical breakthroughs I was excited about, she'd respond with things like, "I could never understand all that computer stuff. I'm more of a people person." The implication being that technical skills were somehow less valuable than her self-proclaimed social intelligence. Michael Kim, David's younger brother, was completing his law degree at SMU with plans to join the family business as their in-house counsel. He largely ignored me, except when he needed someone to explain technology concepts he was too proud to admit he didn't understand. "Jessica, you're good with computers, right? Can you help me figure out why my laptop keeps freezing?" became a common refrain, reducing my expertise to the level of technical support rather than recognizing that I was building sophisticated enterprise software. The family's wealth created a bubble of assumptions about success and worth that I found increasingly suffocating. They measured achievement in terms of property portfolios, luxury purchases, and social connections rather than innovation, problem-solving, or actual value creation. My work developing algorithms that could save companies millions of dollars annually was dismissed as playing with computers, while Robert's latest commercial real estate acquisition was treated as evidence of genius-level business acumen. What they never understood was that I wasn't trying to prove myself to them. I was too busy building something that would eventually make their wealth look modest by comparison. While they were focused on moving money around in real estate deals, I was creating entirely new markets and solving problems that affected thousands of businesses across multiple industries. Streamline AI's early days were challenging in ways that had nothing to do with technology and everything to do with being underestimated. When I pitched to potential investors, I'd often find myself explaining basic concepts that male founders were assumed to understand intuitively. Venture capitalists would ask me if I had a male co-founder or technical advisor, seemingly unable to believe that a woman could both conceptualize and execute complex software architecture. The breakthrough came when I connected with Helen Chang, a former Google executive who had started her own venture capital fund focused on enterprise software. Helen understood both the technical sophistication of what I was building and the market opportunity it represented. "You're not just solving workflow problems," she told me during our first meeting in her Austin office. "You're creating the infrastructure for how mid-market companies will operate in the next decade." Helen's investment of $2 million In seed funding allowed me to hire my first employees and move operations out of my apartment into a proper office space in Austin's tech corridor. More importantly, her validation gave me credibility with other investors and potential clients who had initially dismissed my pitches. When a former Google executive bets on your company, other people start paying attention. Carlos Martinez became my first hire and eventually my business development partner. We'd worked together at a previous software company where I'd been relegated to back-end development, while less qualified male colleagues were promoted to client-facing roles. Carlos had witnessed firsthand how my technical solutions consistently outperformed those of more senior developers, and when I offered him equity to join Streamline AI, he jumped at the opportunity. "I've seen what you can build," he told me over coffee at our favorite Austin cafe. "If you can create software that makes businesses run better, companies will pay whatever it costs. And if they'll pay whatever it costs, we're going to get very, very rich." Carlos understood sales and marketing in ways that complemented my technical expertise perfectly. While I focused on product development and architecture, he handled client relationships and business strategy. Our partnership worked because we respected each other's strengths and never felt the need to compete for recognition or credit. The Kim family's reaction to my business developments ranged from polite disinterest to active dismissal. When I mentioned hiring employees, Patricia responded with, "How nice that you're keeping busy with your little project." When Carlos and I signed our first major client, a manufacturing company that paid us 6 figures annually to optimize their supply chain workflows, Robert's only comment was, "Good for you, honey." "David, tell us about the new downtown development." Their inability to recognize the significance of what I was building became a source of private amusement rather than frustration. I'd learned early in life that some people would never see past their preconceptions, and trying to convince them was a waste of energy better spent on actual progress. Instead, I channeled my focus into making Streamline AI indispensable to the companies that did recognize its value. By the end of our first year, we had 12 clients across various industries. Manufacturing companies used our software to optimize production schedules. Healthcare organizations streamlined patient intake processes. Professional services firms automated billing and project management workflows. Each implementation proved that our technology could deliver measurable results in terms of time saved, errors reduced, and efficiency gained. The second year brought exponential growth as word spread through business networks about the results our clients were achieving. Companies that had initially been skeptical about investing in automation software became eager to implement our solutions after seeing their competitors gain significant operational advantages. Our client base grew to 47 companies, and our annual recurring revenue exceeded $3 million. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. David watched my success with a mixture of pride and bewilderment. He genuinely supported my ambitions and celebrated our milestones, but he'd grown up in an environment where business success was measured in terms of assets acquired rather than value created. The concept of software as a scalable business model was foreign to his experience with real estate development, where growth required continual capital investment in new properties. "I don't really understand how your business works," he admitted, during one of our evening walks around our East Austin neighborhood. "But I can see that you're building something important. I just wish my family could see it too." His frustration with his family's dismissive attitude toward my work was genuine, but he lacked the tools or courage to effectively challenge their behavior. Confronting his mother's condescension would have required him to acknowledge that their family's entire social structure was built on outdated assumptions about gender roles and professional hierarchies. That level of self-examination was beyond his comfort zone. The stock options I'd granted David when we got married represented 5% of the company, a gesture that seemed symbolic at the time but would prove to be worth more than his family's entire real estate portfolio. I'd tried explaining the potential value to him on multiple occasions, walking him through scenarios where Streamline AI could be acquired or go public, but he'd always responded with polite interest rather than genuine comprehension. "It's like monopoly money until it's real money," he'd say, echoing his mother's dismissive attitude toward anything that wasn't tangible real estate or traditional investments. The irony was that my monopoly money was about to become more valuable than anything his family had ever touched. As we entered our third year of operations, the venture capital world began taking serious notice of Streamline AI. Our combination of rapid growth, impressive client retention rates, and expanding market opportunity made us exactly the kind of investment that top-tier firms competed to lead. Helen Chang arranged introductions with partners at some of Silicon Valley's most prestigious venture capital firms, and suddenly I found myself fielding calls from investors who managed billions of dollars in assets. The Series A funding round that closed in month 36 brought in $15 million from Sequoia Capital, with additional investment from Google Ventures and several other prominent firms. The valuation of $85 million meant that my personal stake in the company was worth approximately $34 million on paper, while David's 5% stake was worth over $4 million. I shared these numbers with David over dinner at our favorite restaurant in downtown Austin, watching his expression shift from casual interest to stunned comprehension as the implications sank in. "Wait, you're saying my stock options are worth $4 million?" he asked, setting down his fork and staring at me with wide eyes. "On paper, yes. And if we continue growing at our current rate, that number will increase significantly over the next few years." I reached across the table and took his hand. "David, this is just the beginning. Streamline AI is going to be much bigger than anyone in your family realizes." He was quiet for the remainder of dinner, processing information that challenged everything he'd been taught about wealth creation and business success. His family had spent decades building their real estate empire through careful acquisitions and strategic developments, accumulating wealth gradually through traditional investment approaches. The idea that software could create more value in 3 years than real estate could generate in 3 decades was revolutionary to his worldview. When we got home that evening, David called his father to share the news about our Series A funding and the company's new valuation. I could hear Robert's voice through the phone, offering congratulations that sounded more confused than enthusiastic. "That's wonderful, son. So Jessica's computer company is doing well. Will this affect your position at Kim Properties?" The question revealed everything about how Robert viewed my success. Rather than recognizing Streamline AI as a significant business achievement in its own right, he was concerned about whether it might distract David from his real career in the family real estate business. The possibility that my company might eventually be worth more than Kim Properties had never occurred to him. Over the following months, as Streamline AI's growth continued accelerating and industry recognition increased, the Kim family's attitude toward my work began shifting from dismissive to grudgingly interested. Patricia started asking more detailed questions about our clients and revenue, though she still framed these inquiries in terms of curiosity rather than respect. "It's fascinating how much companies will pay for computer programs," she'd say, as if our software solutions were luxury purchases rather than essential business tools. The real change came when Forbes published an article about emerging enterprise software companies, featuring Streamline AI as one of 5 startups to watch in the coming year. The article included my photograph and quoted me extensively about the future of workplace automation. When Patricia's friends began asking her about her daughter-in-law's company after reading the Forbes piece, her tone shifted noticeably. "Jessica has built quite an impressive little business," she told her bridge club, according to Amanda, who reported the conversation to David with barely concealed jealousy. "We always knew she was talented with computers." The historical revisionism was breathtaking, but I appreciated that she was finally acknowledging my professional existence, even if she was rewriting history to avoid admitting her previous dismissiveness. Amanda's reaction to my growing success was more complex and ultimately more revealing. As someone who had built her identity around social status and traditional markers of feminine achievement, she struggled to process the reality that her technology-focused sister-in-law was accumulating wealth and recognition that dwarfed her own accomplishments. Her husband, Thomas, worked at a prestigious investment bank, but his annual salary was a fraction of what my company was worth on paper. "It must be nice to get lucky with a computer program," she said during one Sunday dinner, her voice carrying an edge that hadn't been there in previous years. "Some people just happen to be in the right place at the right time." The comment revealed her need to diminish my success rather than acknowledge that it resulted from years of hard work, technical expertise, and strategic decision-making. Attributing Streamline AI's growth to luck allowed her to maintain her worldview where traditional paths to success were superior to innovative approaches. Michael's response was perhaps the most honest of the family. As someone completing law school and preparing to join Kim Properties, he recognized that the legal and business skills he was developing would never generate the kind of wealth that successful technology companies could create. "I should have studied computer science instead of law," he told me privately during one family gathering. "You're going to make more money than all of us combined." His observation was more accurate than he realized, but I appreciated his directness compared to his mother's condescension or his sister's jealousy. Michael understood that economic landscapes were changing and that traditional professional paths might not offer the same opportunities for wealth creation that previous generations had enjoyed. As Streamline AI approached its fourth year of operations, acquisition offers began arriving from major technology companies interested in integrating our workflow automation capabilities into their existing product suites. Microsoft, Salesforce, and Oracle all expressed interest in purchasing the company, with preliminary valuations ranging from $200 million to $400 million. These conversations forced me to consider whether I wanted to sell Streamline AI or continue building it as an independent company with the eventual goal of going public. The decision would affect not only my own financial future, but also the value of the stock options I'd granted to David and several key employees who had joined the company in its early stages. Helen Chang advised me to seriously consider the IPO path, arguing that Streamline AI had the growth trajectory and market position to succeed as a public company. "You've built something that solves real problems for a large and growing market," she explained during one of our strategy sessions in her downtown Austin office. "Companies like yours don't come along often, and when they do, the public markets reward them handsomely." The IPO process would take approximately 18 months from initial planning to actual public offering, assuming we continued hitting our growth targets and market conditions remained favorable. Helen introduced me to investment bankers at Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley who specialized in technology IPOs, and their preliminary assessments suggested that Streamline AI could go public with a valuation between $1 and $3 billion, depending on our performance over the next year. Those numbers meant that my personal stake in the company could be worth anywhere from $400 million to over $1 billion, while David's 5% stake could be worth $50 to $150 million. The magnitude of these potential outcomes was difficult to comprehend, even for someone who had been building toward them for years. I decided not to share the IPO timeline or potential valuations with David or his family until we were closer to actually going public. The Kim family's evolving attitude toward my success had been amusing to observe, but I wanted to see how they would react to the ultimate validation of what they had dismissed as a computer hobby for so many years. The irony was that their dismissiveness had actually been liberating. Because they never took my work seriously, they never tried to interfere with my business decisions or claim credit for my achievements. Their lack of interest gave me complete freedom to build Streamline AI according to my own vision, without the complications that might have arisen if they had recognized its potential from the beginning. As we entered the final year before our planned IPO, Streamline AI's momentum continued building. Our client base grew to over 200 companies across 15 different industries. Annual recurring revenue exceeded $25 million. We employed 67 people across offices in Austin, San Francisco, and Chicago. Industry analysts began comparing us favorably to other successful enterprise software companies, and venture capital firms were actively courting us for additional funding rounds that we no longer needed. The Forbes article that had initially caught Patricia's attention was followed by coverage in the Wall Street Journal, TechCrunch, and Harvard Business Review. I was invited to speak at conferences and participate in panel discussions about the future of workplace automation. The computer girl, who had been relegated to quiet corners of family gatherings, was becoming a recognized voice in the technology industry. David watched these developments with growing amazement and pride, but also with some discomfort as he realized that his wife's professional achievements were beginning to overshadow his own career at Kim Properties. He loved me and genuinely celebrated my success, but he'd been raised in an environment where men were expected to be the primary breadwinners and business leaders in their families. "I'm proud of what you've built," he told me one evening as we walked through our East Austin neighborhood, which had gentrified significantly since we'd moved there. "But sometimes I feel like I'm becoming Mr. Jessica Rodriguez instead of you being Mrs. David Kim." His vulnerability was touching, and I understood the challenge he faced in reconciling his upbringing with our evolving reality. "You're not Mr. Jessica Rodriguez," I assured him. "You're David Kim, and you're successful in your own right. We're just successful in different ways." What I didn't tell him was that his stock options were about to make him wealthier than anyone in his family had ever been, regardless of whose name was associated with the success. The IPO that was now just months away would transform both of our lives, but it would also force the Kim family to confront the reality that their dismissive attitude toward my work had blinded them to the most significant wealth creation opportunity they'd ever encountered. The stage was set for a revelation that would reshape every assumption they'd made about success, technology, and the quiet woman they'd underestimated for so many years. The first signs that something fundamental was shifting in the Kim family dynamics appeared during what should have been a routine Sunday dinner at their Plano estate. Patricia had prepared her usual elaborate spread, complete with her prized china and crystal glasses that she reserved for special occasions. The table was set for 8, accommodating the core family plus Thomas Walsh, Amanda's investment banker husband, who usually dominated conversations with market analysis and financial predictions. What made this particular evening different was the way conversations kept circling back to technology stocks and startup valuations. Thomas had been tracking several recent IPOs in the enterprise software space, and his commentary revealed a growing awareness that significant wealth was being created in sectors the Kim family had traditionally ignored. "The margins on these software companies are incredible," Thomas explained to Robert, gesturing with his wine glass for emphasis. "Once they build the product, every additional customer is almost pure profit. Real estate will always be solid, but the scalability just isn't there compared to tech." I watched Patricia's expression carefully as Thomas continued his analysis. For someone who had spent years dismissing technology as incomprehensible gadgetry, she was paying unusually close attention to discussions about software valuations and recurring revenue models. Her questions were becoming more sophisticated, moving beyond polite curiosity toward genuine interest in understanding how technology companies generated wealth. "Jessica, dear, remind me again how many companies use your software?" she asked during a lull in Thomas's monologue. The question itself wasn't unusual, but her tone had lost some of its condescending edge. She was actually listening for the answer, rather than simply waiting for an opportunity to change the subject. "We're serving about 230 companies now across various industries," I replied, noting how David straightened slightly in his chair. He'd been tracking our client growth more closely lately, finally beginning to understand the significance of our expansion. Manufacturing, healthcare, professional services, logistics. The demand has been growing faster than we anticipated. And they pay monthly fees for this? Robert interjected, his businessman's instincts engaging with concepts he could relate to. Recurring revenue was something he understood from his real estate portfolio, where rental properties generated consistent monthly income. Annual contracts mostly, with monthly or quarterly payment options depending on the client's preferences. The average contract value has been increasing as companies expand their usage of our platform. I kept my explanation straightforward, avoiding technical details that might lose their attention. Amanda leaned forward, her competitive nature clearly engaged. What kind of annual contracts are we talking about, if you don't mind me asking? Her question carried an undertone of challenge, as if she were testing whether my business was as substantial as I claimed. It varies significantly based on company size and implementation scope. Our smallest clients pay around $50,000 annually, while our largest enterprise clients pay upward of $500,000 per year. The numbers landed with more impact than I'd expected, creating a moment of silence around the table. Michael was the first to break the quiet, his legal training helping him process the mathematical implications. So, with 230 clients averaging, maybe $150,000 each, you're looking at annual revenue somewhere around $35 million. His calculation was reasonably accurate, though he was underestimating our average contract value. We're actually closer to $42 million in annual recurring revenue now, I clarified, watching their expressions shift as they absorbed information that reframed everything they thought they knew about my computer hobby. Thomas whistled, softly, his investment banking background giving him context for what those revenue numbers meant in terms of company valuation. At those multiples, assuming decent margins and growth rates, you're looking at a company worth several $100 million easily, maybe more. The conversation that followed revealed how dramatically the family's perception of my work was evolving. Patricia began asking detailed questions about our client retention rates, growth projections, and expansion plans. Robert wanted to understand our competitive advantages and barriers to entry. Even Amanda seemed genuinely interested in learning about our marketing strategies and customer acquisition costs. David sat quietly through most of this discussion, processing information that was transforming his understanding of what we'd been building together. His 5% stake in Streamline AI wasn't just symbolic appreciation for his support during the early years. It represented ownership in a business that was generating more annual revenue than most of the commercial properties in his family's real estate portfolio. The shift in family dynamics became more pronounced over the following weeks. Patricia began mentioning my work to her social circle, describing Streamline AI in terms that suggested pride rather than mere tolerance. When her Bridge Club friends asked about her children's careers, she started including me in her responses, rather than focusing exclusively on David's role at Kim Properties. My daughter-in-law has built quite an impressive technology company, she told her friend Margaret during a conversation I overheard while visiting their house. They serve hundreds of businesses across the country. It's remarkable what young people can accomplish with computers these days. The historical revisionism was breathtaking. 3 months earlier, she'd been referring to my work as playing with gadgets. Now she was presenting herself as someone who had always recognized and supported my entrepreneurial efforts. But I found her newfound respect preferable to her previous dismissiveness, even if it was motivated primarily by financial recognition rather than genuine appreciation for innovation. Amanda's adjustment was more complex and revealing. As someone whose identity was built around traditional markers of success and social status, she struggled to reconcile her previous superiority with the reality that her sister-in-law was building something far more valuable than anything she'd achieved. Her husband's investment banking salary, while substantial, paled in comparison to the equity value I was accumulating through Streamline AI's growth. I've been thinking about learning more about technology, she mentioned during one family gathering. her tone suggesting this was a casual observation rather than a fundamental shift in her worldview. Thomas says there are so many opportunities in the sector right now. Her comment revealed an internal struggle between maintaining her established identity and adapting to changing economic realities. The traditional paths to wealth and status that had served previous generations were being disrupted by technological innovation, and she was beginning to recognize that her dismissive attitude toward technology might have been strategically short-sighted. Michael's response was more direct and honest. As someone preparing to start his career, he had fewer preconceptions to overcome and could see more clearly how economic landscapes were shifting. "I should have asked you for advice years ago," he told me privately during one family dinner. "I'm about to graduate with a law degree that will help me make a decent living, but you've built something that could make you incredibly wealthy. I completely misunderstood what you were doing." His acknowledgement meant more to me than Patricia's revisionist pride or Amanda's grudging interest. Michael was recognizing that innovation and technical expertise were creating opportunities that traditional professional paths couldn't match, and he was honest enough to admit his previous misconceptions. The venture capital community's growing interest in Streamline AI provided external validation that even the Kim family couldn't ignore. When Andreessen Horowitz reached out about leading our Series B funding round, the conversation represented more than just capital investment. Mark Andreessen himself participated in the pitch meeting, discussing how workflow automation was transforming entire industries and how Streamline AI was positioned to capture significant market share. The Series B round closed at a pre-money valuation of $350 million, with Andreessen Horowitz investing $25 million alongside existing investors. The post-money valuation of $375 million meant that my personal stake in the company was now worth approximately $150 million on paper, while David's 5% stake had grown to over $18 million. I shared these numbers with David over dinner at Uchi, one of Austin's most exclusive restaurants, watching his face as he processed information that was reshaping his understanding of our financial situation. "My stock options are worth $18 million? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Based on the current valuation, yes. And David, this is still just the beginning. We're planning to go public within the next 12 to 18 months. If the IPO goes well, these numbers could increase dramatically." He set down his chopsticks and stared at me across the table, his expression mixing amazement with something that looked like apprehension. "Jessica, I don't think you understand what this means for my family. My parents have spent their entire lives building Kim properties, and you've created more value in 4 years than they've accumulated in 30. His observation was accurate, but I could see that the implications made him uncomfortable. David had been raised to believe that wealth came through careful accumulation over decades, not through the explosive growth that successful technology companies could achieve. The idea that his wife had become the primary generator of wealth in their relationship challenged fundamental assumptions about gender roles and professional hierarchies that had shaped his worldview. "Does this change how you feel about us?" I asked, reaching across the table to take his hand. "About our marriage?" "No," he replied quickly, then paused to consider the question more carefully. "Maybe. I don't know. I'm proud of what you've built, and I love you. But this is so far outside anything I was prepared for. My mother spent years treating your work like a hobby, and now it turns out you're building something that could make us incredibly wealthy." The complexity of his emotions was understandable. He was processing not just the financial implications of my success, but also the social dynamics that would inevitably shift as a result. The Kim family's established hierarchy, where Robert's business acumen and wealth commanded respect and deference, was being challenged by the reality that his daughter-in-law had achieved something none of them had imagined possible. Over the following months, as news of our Series B funding spread through Austin's business community and beyond, the external recognition of Streamline AI's success began affecting how the Kim family was perceived in their social circles. Patricia's friends started asking detailed questions about my company during their charitable events and social gatherings. Robert found himself fielding inquiries from other real estate developers who were curious about his daughter-in-law's technology business. The most significant shift occurred when the Austin Business Journal published a cover story about Streamline AI's growth and my role as CEO. The article included photographs of our downtown Austin offices, interviews with satisfied clients, and analysis from industry experts who predicted that workflow automation would become essential for businesses across all sectors. The story presented me not as David Kim's wife who worked with computers, but as a technology leader whose innovations were changing how companies operated. Patricia called me the day the article was published, her voice carrying an excitement I'd never heard before. "Jessica, dear, I had no idea your company was so significant. Margaret showed me the article at lunch today, and I have to admit I was quite impressed. Could you explain to me again how the software works?" Her question represented a fundamental shift in our relationship. For the first time since I'd known her, Patricia was asking about my work because she genuinely wanted to understand it, not because she felt obligated to show polite interest. The condescension was gone, replaced by curiosity and what seemed like genuine respect. I spent 30 minutes on the phone explaining workflow automation concepts, client implementation processes, and growth strategies. Patricia listened attentively, asking intelligent questions that demonstrated she was processing the information rather than simply waiting for the conversation to end. By the time we hung up, she had a much clearer understanding of what Streamline AI did and why it was valuable to our clients. "I think I owe you an apology," she said before ending the call. "I'm afraid I didn't appreciate the significance of what you were building. I hope you'll forgive an old woman for being slow to understand modern business." Her apology was more gracious than I'd expected, though I suspected it was motivated as much by the external recognition my success was bringing to their family as by genuine regret about her previous behavior. Regardless of her motivations, I appreciated that she was acknowledging her misconceptions and making an effort to engage more respectfully with my work. Amanda's adjustment proved more challenging and psychologically complex. The Austin Business Journal article had mentioned that I was one of the youngest female CEOs to achieve such rapid growth in the enterprise software sector, positioning me as a role model for women in technology. Amanda, who had built her identity around being the successful daughter in the Kim family, struggled to reconcile this public recognition with her previous dismissive attitude toward my career. "I suppose we should all be investing in technology stocks now," she said during one Sunday dinner, her tone attempting casual sophistication but revealing underlying tension. "Thomas has been looking at some opportunities in the sector." Her comment reflected a broader pattern of trying to maintain relevance in conversations about business and wealth creation that were increasingly centered around technology rather than traditional investments. As someone whose understanding of business was limited to conventional approaches like real estate and banking, she found herself at a disadvantage in discussions about software companies, venture capital, and IPO valuations. Thomas, meanwhile, was becoming genuinely interested in the technology sector from a professional perspective. His investment banking background gave him tools for analyzing software companies that his in-laws lacked, and he began tracking Streamline AI's progress with the kind of attention he usually reserved for clients. "Your growth metrics are exceptional," he told me privately during one family gathering. "If you ever need connections in the banking world for an IPO or acquisition, I'd be happy to make introductions." His offer represented a significant shift in how he viewed my business. Previously, Thomas had treated my work as an interesting novelty that might eventually become profitable. Now he was recognizing Streamline AI as the kind of company that investment banks competed to represent in major financial transactions. Robert's evolution was perhaps the most interesting to observe. As someone whose business success had been built through careful analysis of market conditions, property values, and investment timing, He possessed instincts that translated well to evaluating technology companies once he understood their business models. His questions about Streamline AI became increasingly sophisticated, focusing on competitive advantages, market size, and scalability factors that would determine long-term success. The recurring revenue model is brilliant, he told me during one conversation about business strategy. Once you solve a problem for a company, they have to keep paying you every year or their operations fall apart again. That's much more predictable than real estate transactions. His analysis revealed that he was beginning to understand why technology companies could achieve valuations that seemed disproportionate compared to traditional businesses. The combination of recurring revenue, scalable software delivery, and large addressable markets created opportunities for wealth creation that real estate development couldn't match. As Streamline AI approached its 5th year of operations, the IPO planning process began in earnest. Helen Chang connected me with investment banking teams at Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley who specialized in technology IPOs. Their preliminary analysis suggested that Streamline AI could go public with a valuation between $800 million and $2 billion, depending on market conditions and our financial performance during the lead-up to the offering. The due diligence process required extensive documentation of our business operations, financial history, competitive position, and growth projections. Teams of analysts, lawyers, and accountants spent weeks reviewing every aspect of Streamline AI's development, from our initial seed funding through our current client contracts and revenue projections. Throughout this process, I maintained confidentiality about the specific IPO timeline and valuation estimates. The Kim family knew that we were considering going public eventually, but I wanted the actual announcement to be a surprise that would demonstrate just how significantly they had underestimated what I'd been building. The irony was that their initial dismissiveness had actually been beneficial for Streamline AI's development, because they never took my work seriously enough to offer advice or attempt to influence my business decisions. I had complete freedom to build the company according to my own vision and strategic priorities. Their lack of interest protected me from the kind of family interference that might have constrained my choices or created conflicts between personal relationships and business requirements. As we entered the final months before our planned IPO announcement, Streamline AI's momentum continued accelerating. Our client base exceeded 300 companies, annual recurring revenue approached $60 million, and we employed over 90 people across multiple offices. Industry analysts were comparing us favorably to other successful enterprise software companies, and acquisition offers from major technology firms were arriving regularly. The transformation in how the Kim family viewed my work was remarkable to witness. Conversations that once revolved around real estate developments and traditional investments now frequently included discussions about technology trends, software markets, and startup valuations. Patricia had begun reading technology industry publications to better understand the sector where her daughter-in-law was achieving such success. "I never imagined that computer programs could be worth so much money," she confided to me during one visit to their Plano estate. "When you first started talking about your business, I thought it was something you would do until you had children and could focus on family full-time. I'm embarrassed to admit how wrong I was." Her honesty was touching, though I suspected she was also motivated by growing awareness that my success was reflecting positively on their family's reputation. The Kim name was becoming associated with innovation and entrepreneurship rather than just traditional real estate wealth, and Patricia was sophisticated enough to recognize the social advantages this association provided. David's adjustment to our evolving financial situation was ongoing and sometimes challenging. He loved me and celebrated my achievements, but he was also processing the reality that his stock options were worth more than he could earn at Kim Properties over multiple decades. The traditional gender dynamics he'd grown up with were being inverted in ways that required significant psychological adaptation. "Sometimes I feel like I'm living in someone else's life," he told me during one of our evening walks through East Austin. 6 months ago, I thought I understood our relationship, our finances, our future. Now I'm learning that my wife is building something that could make us incredibly wealthy, and I don't even understand how the business works. His vulnerability was endearing, and I appreciated his honesty about the challenges he was facing. David, you've been supportive of my work from the beginning, even when your family was dismissive. Your belief in me meant everything during the early years when I was building Streamline AI in our apartment bedroom. But I didn't really believe in it, he replied, stopping to face me on the sidewalk. I thought it was a nice hobby that might eventually make some money. I had no idea you were building something this significant. His admission revealed how completely the entire family had underestimated what I was capable of achieving. Even David, who loved me and wanted me to succeed, had never imagined that my computer hobby could generate the kind of wealth that typically required decades of traditional business success to accumulate. The stage was set for a revelation that would force all of them to confront the magnitude of their miscalculations. The IPO announcement, when it came, would transform not just our personal finances, but also the entire family's understanding of success, innovation, and the quiet woman they had so dramatically underestimated. The discovery happened on a Tuesday morning in October while David was in the shower, and his phone buzzed with what appeared to be a routine work message. I had never violated his privacy before, had never felt the need to check his communications or question his activities. Our marriage had been built on trust and mutual respect, even as we navigated the complexities of his family's initial rejection and gradual acceptance of my success. But something about the message preview made me pause as I was getting dressed for another day of IPO preparation meetings. The sender was listed as V, and the preview text read, "Can't wait to celebrate with you when the announcement happens." This changes everything for us. My hands moved without conscious thought, opening the message thread that revealed months of communications with Vanessa Chen, David's college girlfriend who had remained close to the Kim family even after their relationship ended. The woman his parents had always preferred, the daughter of another prominent Texas business family whose social standing aligned perfectly with their expectations for their son's future wife. The messages painted a devastating picture of deception that had been unfolding parallel to Streamline AI's growth and my increasing integration into the Kim family. David and Vanessa had reconnected 18 months ago, initially through what appeared to be innocent social interactions at mutual friends' events. But their relationship had evolved far beyond casual friendship, developing into an emotional and physical affair that had been carefully concealed from both families. I know this is complicated with Jessica's business taking off, but we can't keep pretending forever, read one message from Vanessa dated 3 weeks earlier. My parents are asking questions about why I'm still single, and your mother keeps hinting that she'd love to see us together again. David's response revealed the depth of his betrayal and the calculated nature of their deception. I need to wait until after the IPO announcement. Jessica's company is going public soon, and the timing has to be right. Once that's settled, we can figure out how to handle the transition properly. The word transition hit me like a physical blow. They weren't discussing whether to leave their respective situations, but rather how to manage the logistics of David divorcing me and marrying Vanessa. The IPO wasn't just a professional milestone for me. It was the financial event they were waiting for to ensure David could leave our marriage with maximum economic benefit. Further reading revealed that Vanessa was pregnant, expecting their child in approximately 4 months. The timeline meant that their affair had been ongoing during some of Streamline AI's most critical growth periods, including the Series B funding round and the early stages of IPO planning. While I had been working 18-hour days to build something extraordinary, David had been building a secret life with the woman his family had always wished he'd married instead of me. The most crushing discovery was a message thread between David and his mother discussing their plans. Patricia wasn't just aware of the affair. She was actively encouraging it and providing strategic advice about timing and public relations management. "Vanessa has always been perfect for you, darling," Patricia had written in a message dated 2 months ago. "I know Jessica has done well with her computer business, but success in business doesn't necessarily translate to being the right wife for our family. Vanessa understands our world in ways that Jessica never will." Her response revealed the fundamental truth about the Kim family's attitude toward me. Despite their recent expressions of respect for my professional achievements, they still viewed me as an outsider whose success couldn't compensate for my failure to fit their social expectations. My technology company might be worth hundreds of millions of dollars, but I would never be the daughter-in-law they truly wanted. Robert's involvement was more subtle, but equally damaging. Messages between him and David discussed the financial implications of divorce timing, specifically how David's stock options in Streamline AI could be protected and maximized through strategic legal maneuvering. "You need to be careful about how the divorce is structured," Robert had advised in one message. "Those stock options could be worth a fortune if her company goes public successfully. Make sure you get proper legal advice about community property laws and equity compensation." The realization that David's father was helping him strategize how to extract maximum financial benefit from our marriage while planning to leave me for another woman was devastating. They weren't just betraying me personally, they were calculating how to profit from the business I had built while systematically excluding me from their family's future. Amanda's messages in the thread were perhaps the most revealing about the family's true feelings. "I never understood why David settled for Jessica in the first place," she had written to her mother. "Vanessa has always been so much more appropriate for our family. The timing is actually perfect now that Jessica's business is successful. David can benefit financially from the divorce settlement and still end up with the wife he should have married originally." Her casual cruelty was breathtaking. She was discussing the destruction of my marriage as if it were a strategic business decision, calculating how her brother could maximize his personal and financial outcomes while discarding me once I had served my purpose as a wealth generator. Michael's participation in the conspiracy was limited but present. Messages showed that he was aware of David's affair and the family's plans, but had chosen not to warn me or object to their deception. His silence represented a betrayal of its own, particularly given our recent conversations where he had expressed admiration for my business achievements and personal integrity. The most damaging discovery was a document attachment in one of David's messages to his father. A draft post-nuptial agreement prepared by the Kim family's attorney, designed to limit my claims on David's stock options while ensuring he retained maximum value from Streamline AI's IPO. The document was sophisticated and ruthless, using legal technicalities to argue that his equity compensation was separate property despite being granted during our marriage. I photographed every message, every document, every piece of evidence that revealed the scope of their deception. The irony wasn't lost on me that the same methodical approach I used for building Streamline AI was now being applied to documenting the betrayal of the people I had trusted most completely. The business implications were staggering. David's 5% stake in Streamline AI, worth approximately $25 million based on our current private valuation, could be worth $50 to $100 million or more following a successful IPO. The Kim family wasn't just planning to end my marriage. They were positioning themselves to benefit enormously from the financial success of the company I had built, while they dismissed my work as a hobby. What made their betrayal even more calculated was the timing. They had waited until Streamline AI was on the verge of going public, ensuring that David's stock options would reach maximum value before initiating divorce proceedings. If they had acted earlier, his equity stake would have been worth significantly less. Their patience revealed the coldly strategic nature of their planning. The emotional devastation was compounded by professional concerns about how a divorce scandal might affect Streamline AI's IPO process. Investment banks and institutional investors conducted extensive due diligence on company leadership, and personal turmoil involving the CEO could potentially impact their confidence in the offering. The Kim family's timing threatened not just my personal happiness, but also the culmination of years of professional effort. I spent the remainder of that morning in my home office, ostensibly reviewing IPO documentation while actually processing the magnitude of what I had discovered. The sounds of David finishing his shower and preparing for work felt surreal against the backdrop of learning that our entire marriage had become a facade designed to maximize his financial benefit from my success. When he kissed me goodbye before leaving for Kim Properties, his affection felt like performance art. "Have a good day with the Goldman Sachs team," he said, squeezing my shoulder in what had once seemed like genuine support. "I'm proud of what you've built." His words carried new meaning now that I understood they came from someone who was calculating how to extract maximum value from my achievements while planning to abandon me for another woman. The pride he expressed was actually satisfaction that his stock options were becoming increasingly valuable as Streamline AI approached its IPO. Over the following days, I maintained a careful facade of normalcy while quietly preparing for revelations that would transform everything. The IPO process continued on schedule, with investment banking teams completing their due diligence and market analysis. Goldman Sachs projected that Streamline AI could go public with a valuation between $1.2 and $2.8 billion, depending on market conditions and investor appetite for enterprise software companies. Those numbers meant that my personal stake in the company would be worth between $480 million and over $1 billion, while David's 5% stake would be worth $60 to $140 million. The Kim family's betrayal was positioned to be one of the most lucrative deceptions in recent memory, assuming their plans proceeded without interference. But I had no intention of allowing their plans to proceed smoothly. The same strategic thinking that had built Streamline AI into an industry-leading company was now focused on ensuring that their betrayal would be exposed in the most devastating possible manner. They had underestimated me for years, dismissing my capabilities while benefiting from my success. Their final miscalculation would be assuming that I would accept their deception passively. The IPO announcement was scheduled for the following month, coinciding with Streamline AI's 5th anniversary and what should have been a celebration of everything we had accomplished together. Instead, it would become the moment when the Kim family's betrayal was exposed, and their carefully calculated plans collapsed under the weight of their own deception. I began making discreet inquiries about divorce attorneys who specialized in high-net-worth cases involving equity compensation and stock options. The legal complexities of dividing assets that included pre-IPO equity stakes required sophisticated expertise, particularly when one party had been planning strategic deception while the other had been building the value they were attempting to appropriate. The attorney I selected, Maria Santos, had extensive experience with technology company divorces and understood both the financial and strategic implications of timing equity divisions around IPO events. "Your husband's stock options were granted during your marriage as compensation for his support of your business efforts," she explained during our confidential consultation. "Regardless of any post-nuptial agreements they might try to impose, those equity stakes represent community property under Texas law." Her analysis revealed that the Kim family's legal strategy was flawed in fundamental ways. Their attempt to characterize David's stock options as separate property would fail. Under scrutiny, particularly given the documented evidence I possessed of his knowledge and involvement in Streamline AI's development, the post-nuptial agreement they were preparing would likely be unenforceable due to issues of disclosure, consideration, and potential duress. More importantly, Maria identified strategic opportunities for protecting Streamline AI's IPO process, while ensuring that David's betrayal would be exposed at the most impactful moment. If we file divorce proceedings immediately before or during the IPO announcement, we can seek emergency injunctions preventing him from disposing of or transferring his equity stakes. The court filings will become public record, which means their Entire deception will be exposed precisely when they expected to benefit most from it. The poetic justice of this timing was irresistible. The IPO announcement that was meant to culminate years of professional achievement would also become the moment when personal betrayal was revealed and justice was served. The Kim family had waited for maximum financial impact from their deception. I would ensure they experienced maximum reputational and emotional impact from its exposure. As Streamline AI's IPO announcement approached, the Kim family's excitement became increasingly apparent. Patricia began planning what she described as a celebration dinner for the family, clearly anticipating that the public offering would represent a financial windfall that elevated their social status significantly. She had no idea that the same event would expose her son's affair and her own involvement in planning my betrayal. David's behavior became increasingly strained as the announcement date approached. He was simultaneously excited about the financial implications of going public and anxious about managing the timing of his planned deception. His conversations with me became more forced, his affection more obviously performative. He was counting down days until he could abandon our marriage while retaining maximum benefit from my success. "Are you nervous about the IPO?" he asked one evening as we sat in our living room, his question carrying undertones I now understood differently. He wasn't concerned about my emotional state. He was assessing whether I suspected anything about his plans. "Not nervous exactly," I replied, watching his expression carefully. "More like anticipating. This announcement will change everything for both of us." My words carried double meaning that he couldn't detect, but I took satisfaction in their accuracy. The IPO would indeed change everything, just not in the way he expected. Amanda's excitement was more transparent and materialistic. During family dinners, she began making comments about how David's stock options would transform their family's wealth and social position. "It's incredible to think that Jessica's little computer company is going to make us all rich," she said during one Sunday meal, her tone revealing that she viewed my professional achievements primarily in terms of their benefit to the Kim family. Her attitude perfectly encapsulated their fundamental misconception. They saw Streamline AI's success as something that happened to benefit them rather than something I had created through years of innovation and strategic execution. Even as they planned to betray me, they couldn't conceive of my achievements as independent of their family's interests. The final piece of evidence I needed came through Carlos Martinez, my business development partner, who had remained loyally focused on Streamline AI's growth throughout the IPO preparation process. During a conversation about post-IPO expansion plans, he mentioned that David had approached him about potential opportunities in the technology sector. He seemed really interested in learning more about the industry, Carlos told me over coffee at our usual Austin cafe. Asked a lot of questions about how equity compensation works at startups and how founders typically structure their ownership stakes. I thought it was strange since he's never shown much interest in tech before. Carlos's observation revealed that David had been researching technology industry practices not to better understand my work, but to optimize his strategy for extracting value from our divorce. He was conducting due diligence on his own betrayal, ensuring that he understood the financial mechanisms well enough to maximize his benefit from ending our marriage. The irony was that all of his research was irrelevant, because he fundamentally misunderstood both the legal framework governing community property in Texas and my willingness to accept his deception passively. His stock options were community property regardless of his strategic planning, and his betrayal would be exposed at the moment when it could cause maximum damage to his reputation and family relationships. As the IPO announcement date arrived, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The same focus and determination that had built Streamline AI was now channeled toward ensuring that justice was served and truth was revealed. The Kim family had spent years underestimating my capabilities. Their final and most devastating miscalculation was assuming that I would allow their betrayal to proceed without consequences. The stage was set for revelations that would expose not just David's affair, but the entire family's involvement in planning my deception and their calculating attitude toward my professional success. The IPO that was meant to represent the culmination of my achievements would also become the moment when their betrayal was revealed and their carefully constructed plans collapsed completely. Patricia's champagne glass was waiting to be filled with celebration that would turn to devastation. David's stock options were about to become evidence in divorce proceedings rather than the foundation for his new life with Vanessa. The Kim family's social standing was about to be transformed, but not in the way they had anticipated. The computer girl they had dismissed for so many years was about to demonstrate that underestimating her had been the most expensive mistake of their lives. The morning of December 15th dawned crisp and clear in Austin, with the kind of brilliant winter sunshine that makes Texas winters deceptively pleasant. I stood in my home office at 5:30 a.m., reviewing the final presentation materials for what would become the most significant day in Streamline AI's history and the most devastating day in the Kim family's carefully constructed world of privilege and deception. The New York Stock Exchange opening bell would ring in exactly 4.5 hours, marking Streamline AI's debut as a publicly traded company with the ticker symbol SLAI. Goldman Sachs had priced our initial public offering at $42 per share, valuing the company at $1 billion. My personal stake of 40% meant that I would be worth approximately $840 million when trading began, while David's 5% stake would be valued at $105 million. What David didn't know as he slept peacefully in our bedroom was that Maria Santos had already filed divorce papers with the Travis County District Court, along with emergency motions seeking injunctive relief to prevent him from transferring, selling, or otherwise disposing of his Streamline AI equity stakes. The court documents detailed his affair with Vanessa Chen, his family's involvement in planning the deception, and their calculated strategy for maximizing financial benefit from betraying me. The timing was precise and deliberate. The divorce filing would become public record at exactly 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, 30 minutes before the NYSE opening bell. Financial journalists covering Streamline AI's IPO would discover the personal drama surrounding the company's leadership, just as they were preparing their coverage of our market debut. The Kim family's betrayal would be exposed at the exact moment they expected to celebrate their most lucrative deception. Patricia had insisted on hosting what she called a historic celebration breakfast at their Plano estate, inviting extended family members and close friends to witness what she anticipated would be a transformative moment for their social standing and financial status. She had no idea that the same breakfast would become the setting for revelations that would destroy their reputation and expose the calculated cruelty of their treatment toward me. I arrived at the Kim estate at 7 a.m., carrying a leather portfolio that contained printed copies of every text message, email, and document I had discovered detailing their betrayal. David had left earlier to handle some last-minute arrangements at Kim Properties, unknowingly giving me the opportunity to confront his family before he could attempt damage control or spin their deception. The house was already bustling with catering staff preparing an elaborate spread for the anticipated celebration. Patricia had hired her favorite event planning company to transform their dining room into what she described as a setting worthy of our family's achievement. Fresh flowers filled every available surface, champagne chilled in silver buckets throughout the house, and a photographer had been engaged to document what Patricia expected would be a joyous family milestone. "Jessica, darling, you look absolutely radiant." Patricia greeted me with the kind of theatrical enthusiasm she reserved for occasions when she wanted to demonstrate her sophistication to hired staff. "Today is going to be such a special day for all of us. I can hardly believe my daughter-in-law is about to become a billionaire." Her words carried the possessive tone that had always irritated me, as if my achievements were somehow family accomplishments rather than the result of my individual effort and innovation. But today, her appropriation of my success would be exposed for what it truly was, a calculated strategy for extracting maximum benefit while planning my betrayal. Amanda arrived with Thomas and their 2 young children, her excitement barely contained as she discussed how David's stock options would affect their family's financial position. "I've been researching waterfront properties in the Hamptons," she confided to her mother, while I pretended to review emails on my phone. "Thomas thinks we should consider expanding our investment portfolio now that we'll have access to serious capital." Her casual assumption that David's equity stake would somehow benefit the extended Kim family revealed their fundamental misunderstanding of both legal realities and my willingness to accept their deception. They were making plans for spending money that would never be available to them, celebrating wealth that was about to be frozen in divorce proceedings. Michael arrived shortly after his sister, his law school training making him more cautious about counting money before it was actually accessible. "Congratulations, Jessica," he said with what seemed like genuine warmth. "I have to admit I never imagined your company would become this valuable when you first started talking about workflow automation." His honesty was refreshing compared to his family's revisionist history about always supporting my entrepreneurial efforts. But even Michael had chosen to remain silent about David's affair and the family's planning, making him complicit in their betrayal despite his more respectful attitude toward my achievements. Robert appeared from his home office carrying a bottle of champagne that he claimed had been saving for a special occasion. "Jessica, my dear, this is truly remarkable," he said with the kind of paternal pride that might have been touching if I hadn't known about his involvement in strategizing David's divorce timing for maximum financial benefit. "Streamline AI going?" Public represents the kind of success that most entrepreneurs only dream about. His words rang hollow now that I understood he viewed my success primarily as an opportunity for his son to extract wealth while abandoning our marriage. The champagne he was preparing to open would soon turn bitter as the reality of their exposed deception became clear. At 8:15 a.m., I excused myself to make what I claimed was an important business call, stepping onto the terrace overlooking Patricia's meticulously maintained gardens. Instead of calling anyone, I opened my laptop and accessed the Travis County District Court's electronic filing system, confirming that the divorce papers and emergency motions had been processed and would become public record in exactly 45 minutes. Maria Santos had structured the legal filings to maximize their impact on both the Kim family's reputation and David's financial position. The emergency motions detailed not just his affair with Vanessa Chen, but also the family's involvement in planning the deception and their calculated timing strategy. Patricia's text messages encouraging the affair were quoted extensively, as were Robert's communications about protecting David's stock options through strategic divorce timing. The court documents also included financial analysis demonstrating that David's Streamline AI equity represented community property earned during our marriage, regardless of any post-nuptial agreements the Kim family might attempt to impose. Maria had anticipated their legal strategy and systematically dismantled their arguments before they could even present them. When I returned to the dining room, the family was gathered around Patricia's oversized television, watching CNBC's pre-market coverage of notable IPOs scheduled for the day. Streamline AI was featured prominently, with financial analysts discussing our growth trajectory, market opportunity, and potential valuation range. The coverage was overwhelmingly positive, emphasizing our strong competitive position and experienced leadership team. "Look at that," Amanda said, pointing at the screen where my photograph appeared alongside Streamline AI's logo. "Our Jessica is going to be on television all day today. This is so exciting for the whole family." Her use of the possessive "our Jessica" perfectly encapsulated their attitude toward my success. They viewed my achievements as family assets, to be celebrated and leveraged, never recognizing that their treatment of me had been consistently dismissive and often cruel. The disconnect between their current enthusiasm and their historical behavior was staggering. David arrived at 8:45 a.m., his timing unfortunately perfect for witnessing the destruction of his carefully planned deception. He kissed me on the cheek with practiced affection, his performance of devoted husband becoming more desperate as the moment of exposure approached. "How are you feeling about today?" he asked, his voice carrying undertones of anxiety that I now understood differently. "Excited," I replied honestly. "Today is going to change everything for both of us." My words were completely accurate, though not in the way he anticipated. At exactly 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, my phone buzzed with a news alert from the Austin Business Journal. The headline read, "Streamline AI CEO files for divorce hours before IPO, alleges affair and family conspiracy." The article had been published simultaneously with the court filings becoming public record, ensuring maximum media coverage of the Kim family's betrayal. I watched David's face as he received the same news alert on his own phone, his expression shifting from confusion to comprehension to panic in the space of seconds. The color drained from his cheeks as he realized that his secret affair and his family's involvement in planning our divorce had been exposed at the worst possible moment. "Jessica," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "we need to talk privately." "I don't think we do," I replied calmly, setting down my coffee cup and opening the leather portfolio I had brought with me. "But I think your family deserves to understand exactly what you've been planning while pretending to celebrate my success." The room fell silent as I began distributing printed copies of text messages between David and Vanessa Chen, communications between David and his parents about affair timing and financial strategy, and the draft post-nuptial agreement designed to minimize my claims on community property. Each family member received a complete documentation package of their involvement in the deception. Patricia was the first to speak, her voice shaking as she scanned the evidence of her own participation in planning my betrayal. "Jessica, dear, I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding. These messages are taken out of context." "Which context would make encouraging your son's affair and helping him plan strategic divorce timing more acceptable?" I asked, my voice remaining steady despite the earthquake of emotions beneath the surface. "The context where you've spent years dismissing my work while calculating how to benefit from its success." Amanda's reaction was more explosive and revealing. "You had no right to go through David's private messages," she said, her voice rising with indignation. "This is a violation of privacy, and it's probably illegal." Her response perfectly demonstrated the Kim family's approach to accountability. Rather than addressing their deception, she was attacking my methods for discovering it. The idea that their betrayal might be morally wrong seemed less important to her than protecting their privacy while planning my destruction. Robert attempted damage control with the kind of smooth talking that had probably served him well in real estate negotiations. "Jessica, I understand you're upset, but we're all family here. These kinds of personal matters should be discussed privately, not aired in public forums." "We're not family," I replied, echoing words that had become meaningful to me. "Your text messages make it clear that I was never truly accepted as family, despite years of trying to earn your respect. I was useful as long as I was generating wealth you could benefit from, but disposable once David was ready to marry the woman you actually wanted as a daughter-in-law." The television continued broadcasting CNBC's coverage of Streamline AI's IPO in the background, creating a surreal contrast between the public celebration of my professional achievements and the private revelation of personal betrayal. Financial analysts were discussing the company's bright future, while the family who had dismissed my work for years confronted evidence of their calculated cruelty. Michael was the only family member who seemed genuinely ashamed of their behavior. "Jessica, I want you to know that I never supported this plan," he said quietly. "I should have warned you when I found out what was happening." "But you didn't," I replied, appreciating his remorse while recognizing that his silence had made him complicit in their deception. "You chose family loyalty over basic honesty, which makes you part of the betrayal regardless of your personal feelings about it." David finally found his voice, though his words revealed more panic than remorse. "Jessica, please, We can work this out privately. The divorce filing is going to hurt Streamline AI's stock price. Your own wealth is going to be affected by this publicity. His concern for the company's valuation rather than the marriage he had betrayed perfectly illustrated his priorities. Even in the moment of exposure, he was calculating financial implications rather than acknowledging the emotional damage he had caused. His primary worry was that his stock options might lose value due to negative publicity rather than remorse about his affair or his family's involvement. Streamline AI will be fine, I said confidently. The company's fundamentals haven't changed, and institutional investors understand that personal drama rarely affects long-term business performance. But your stock options are now frozen pending divorce proceedings, which means you won't be able to sell or transfer them regardless of how the stock performs. The implications of this revelation hit the family like physical blows. David's face went white as he realized that his carefully timed betrayal had backfired completely. Instead of maximizing his benefit from the IPO, he had ensured that his equity stake would be tied up in legal proceedings for months or potentially years. Patricia sank into her chair, champagne glass forgotten as she processed the social implications of their exposed deception. Her friends and social circle were undoubtedly reading the same news coverage that detailed her involvement in planning her son's affair and divorce strategy. The reputation she had spent decades cultivating was being destroyed in real time. "The photographer," Amanda said suddenly, her face pale as she realized the additional implications. "Mother, you hired a photographer to document today. We were going to have pictures taken celebrating the IPO success." The irony was perfect. Patricia had arranged professional documentation of what she expected to be their moment of triumph, but instead, the photographer would capture their family's destruction as their betrayal was exposed. The images would serve as permanent records of their downfall rather than their celebration. At 9:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, the New York Stock Exchange opening bell rang, and Streamline AI began trading as a public company. The stock opened at $51 per share, 21% above the IPO price, indicating strong investor demand and confidence in the company's prospects. Within the first hour of trading, the share price had climbed to $57, valuing the company at over $4 billion. My personal stake was now worth approximately $960 million, making me one of the youngest female billionaires in American history. David's 5% stake, frozen in divorce proceedings, was worth approximately $120 million that he could neither access nor transfer. The financial news coverage was uniformly positive, with analysts praising Streamline AI's strong market debut and growth prospects. The personal drama surrounding the IPO was mentioned in most coverage, but presented as a minor distraction rather than a fundamental concern about the company's leadership or business model. "Congratulations on becoming a billionaire," Thomas said quietly, his investment banking background helping him process the financial implications more quickly than his in-laws. "I hope you know that not all of us supported what happened here." His comment revealed the fractures that were already appearing within the Kim family as they confronted the consequences of their deception. Thomas had benefited from his association with their wealth and social status, but he was sophisticated enough to recognize that their betrayal of me had been both morally wrong and strategically catastrophic. The remainder of the morning passed in a blur of phone calls, media interviews, and legal consultations. Streamline AI's communications team handled press inquiries about the divorce filing with prepared statements, emphasizing that personal matters wouldn't affect business operations. Our stock price continued climbing throughout the day, reaching $62 per share by market close. As I prepared to leave the Kim estate for what would certainly be the last time, Patricia made one final attempt at damage control. "Jessica, surely we can resolve this family matter privately," she said, her voice carrying the kind of desperation that comes from watching decades of reputation building collapse in a single morning. "This stopped being a family matter when you decided I was never really family," I replied, gathering my documents and preparing to leave their lives permanently. "Your text messages make it clear that I was always seen as an outsider whose success could be exploited while planning my eventual disposal." David followed me to my car, his earlier panic now replaced by what appeared to be genuine regret mixed with continued calculation about his financial position. "Jessica, I know I've made terrible mistakes, but destroying my family isn't going to make you feel better about what happened." "I didn't destroy your family," I said, opening my car door and looking back at him one final time. "I simply revealed what your family actually is beneath the veneer of respectability and social standing. Your mother encouraged your affair. Your father helped you strategize the timing for maximum financial benefit, and your sister celebrated the plan to betray me while keeping my money in the family." As I drove away from the Plano estate, I could see Patricia through the dining room windows, still holding court with family members and staff, probably attempting to spin the morning's revelations into something less damaging to their reputation. But the evidence was too extensive and too public for effective damage control. The Kim family's carefully constructed world of privilege and social standing was collapsing under the weight of their own deception, while the woman they had dismissed as an unsuitable outsider had become a billionaire through the very work they had never taken seriously. Their final and most devastating miscalculation had been assuming that I would accept their betrayal without ensuring that justice was served in the most public and financially damaging way possible. 6 months after Streamline AI's IPO transformed me into a billionaire and exposed the Kim family's calculated betrayal, I stood in the conference room of my new headquarters overlooking Lady Bird Lake in downtown Austin. The panoramic windows offered a spectacular view of the city's skyline, a daily reminder of how dramatically my world had changed since that morning when Patricia's champagne glass shattered against her marble floor. Streamline AI's stock had stabilized at $78 per share, giving the company a market capitalization of over $3 billion. My personal net worth had crossed the $1-2 billion threshold, making me not just one of the youngest female billionaires in American history, but also one of the most closely watched technology leaders in the enterprise software space. Forbes had featured me on their cover with the headline, "The Automation Queen: How Jessica Rodriguez Built a Billion-Dollar Empire While Her In-Laws Planned Her Betrayal." The divorce proceedings had concluded 3 weeks earlier with a settlement that reflected both the legal realities of community property law and the strategic advantages created by David's documented deception. His 5% stake in Streamline AI, now worth approximately $150 million, had been divided according to Texas community property statutes. I retained 60% of his equity value, while he received 40%, along with responsibility for all legal fees and court costs associated with the proceedings. More satisfying than the financial resolution was the complete vindication of my position through the legal discovery process. David's affair with Vanessa Chen had been documented in excruciating detail, including hotel receipts, travel records, and communications that revealed the relationship had been ongoing for nearly 2 years. The Kim family's involvement in planning, the timing and strategy of our divorce had been thoroughly exposed, with Patricia's text messages and Robert's financial advice creating an indisputable record of their calculated cruelty. The social consequences for the Kim family had been swift and devastating. Patricia's resignation from 3 charity boards had been accepted immediately, with organizations distancing themselves from the scandal surrounding her documented involvement in planning her son's affair and divorce strategy. Robert's real estate development business had lost 2 major investors who cited concerns about his family's integrity and judgment. Amanda and Thomas had withdrawn from several high-profile social organizations as the scandal continued generating negative publicity. David himself had become something of a pariah in Austin's business community, where the story of his betrayal and strategic miscalculation had become legendary. His position at Kim Properties had become untenable as clients, and partners questioned his trustworthiness and judgment. Within 4 months of the IPO, He had resigned from the family business and relocated to Dallas with Vanessa and their newborn daughter, seeking anonymity that proved elusive given the continued media interest in their story. The most poetic element of their downfall was the financial calculation that had motivated their entire deception. David's 40% share of his original equity stake was worth approximately $60 million, a substantial sum by any measure. However, had he remained married to me and avoided the affair entirely, his full 5% stake would have been worth $150 million. His betrayal had cost him $90 million in addition to destroying his reputation and family relationships. Meanwhile, Streamline AI had thrived beyond even my most optimistic projections. The company's public status had accelerated our growth dramatically, providing access to capital markets and institutional customers that transformed our competitive position. Our client base had expanded to over 800 companies across 23 countries, with annual recurring revenue approaching $200 million. We employed over 400 people across offices in Austin, San Francisco, London, and Singapore. The personal satisfaction of professional vindication was matched by the unexpected opportunities that came with billionaire status and public recognition. I had been invited to join the boards of 3 major technology companies, speak at conferences around the world, and participate in policy discussions about artificial intelligence and workplace automation at the highest levels of government and academia. Perhaps most meaningful was the platform my story had created for discussing broader issues about gender, entrepreneurship, and family dynamics in business. The narrative of the underestimated woman who built a billion-dollar company while her in-laws planned her betrayal had resonated far beyond the technology industry, inspiring conversations about how women's professional achievements are often diminished or appropriated by family members who simultaneously dismiss and exploit their success. The speaking engagement that brought me the most satisfaction was the keynote address I delivered at the annual conference of the National Association of Women Business Owners. Standing before an audience of 500 female entrepreneurs, I shared the complete story of Streamline AI's development and the Kim family's betrayal, emphasizing that success often requires not just building something valuable, but also protecting it from people who would exploit your achievements while undermining your confidence. The most dangerous adversaries aren't always competitors in the marketplace, I told the audience. Sometimes they're the people closest to you, who smile at your face while calculating how to benefit from your work and discard you when convenient. Trust your instincts, document everything, and never apologize for protecting what you've built. The response was overwhelming, with dozens of women approaching me afterward to share similar stories of family members, spouses, or business partners who had attempted to appropriate their professional achievements while questioning their capabilities. The pattern was disturbingly common. Women building successful businesses while dealing with relatives who simultaneously dismissed their work and positioned themselves to benefit from its success. One conversation particularly stayed with me. Sarah Chen, a biotech entrepreneur from San Diego, described how her husband's family had spent years treating her pharmaceutical research as an expensive hobby, while secretly consulting lawyers about how to claim ownership of her patents in the event of divorce. Her story was eerily similar to mine, with in-laws who combined condescension with calculated financial planning. Reading about your situation gave me the courage to confront what was happening in my own marriage, she told me. I realized that their dismissive attitude wasn't just annoying, it was strategic. They wanted me to feel insecure about my work, so I wouldn't protect it properly when they decided to claim it. These conversations reinforced my conviction that sharing my story publicly had been the right decision, despite the personal cost of exposing painful family dynamics. The response from women entrepreneurs around the world suggested that the Kim family's behavior represented a broader pattern of how successful women's achievements are often diminished and exploited by people who should be their strongest supporters. The legal precedent established by my divorce case had also created opportunities to help other women facing similar situations. Maria Santos, the attorney who had represented me so effectively, had begun specializing in cases involving the theft or appropriation of women's intellectual property and business assets by family members. Her practice had grown dramatically as more women recognized that their business achievements might be vulnerable to exploitation by relatives who had access to confidential information about their work. Your case changed everything about how we approach these situations, Maria explained during one of our follow-up consultations. The documentation you provided and the strategic timing of the revelations created a template for protecting women's business assets from family members who would exploit their trust and access. The Kim family's attempts at rehabilitation had been largely unsuccessful, hampered by the extensive documentation of their deception and the continued public interest in their story. Patricia had hired a public relations firm to help restore her reputation, but their efforts were undermined by the regular appearance of new details about the family's behavior. Media outlets continued investigating the story, uncovering additional examples of their calculating approach to personal relationships and financial opportunities. Robert's real estate business had never recovered from the initial scandal, with several major development projects canceled as investors withdrew support. The family's financial situation had deteriorated significantly, forcing them to sell their Plano estate and downsize to a more modest residence in Preston Hollow. The symbolic impact of Patricia losing her carefully curated home, where she had held court for decades, seemed fitting given her central role in planning my betrayal. Amanda and Thomas had relocated to New York, where Thomas hoped his investment banking career could recover from the association with his in-laws scandal. However, the story had been extensively covered in financial media, making it impossible for him to escape the connection entirely. Their social circle had contracted significantly as former friends distanced themselves from the ongoing controversy. The most unexpected development was Michael's decision to reach out to me directly, seeking both personal reconciliation and professional advice. His law school education had been completed under the shadow of his family's scandal, making his job search more challenging than anticipated. When he contacted me 6 months after the divorce was finalized, his message was both apologetic and pragmatic. Jessica, I know I don't deserve your consideration after failing to warn you about what was happening, he wrote in his email. But I wanted you to know that I've always respected what you built with Streamline AI, and I'm ashamed of my family's behavior. If you're ever willing to meet for coffee, I'd like to apologize in person and ask for your advice about starting my career with integrity rather than following my family's example. His request intrigued me, partly because his law degree and understanding of technology issues could be valuable for Streamline AI's expanding legal needs, but mostly because his acknowledgement of wrongdoing and desire for redemption seemed genuine. We met at a neutral coffee shop in downtown Austin, where his remorse appeared authentic and his understanding of his family's failures was more sophisticated than I had expected. I've spent months thinking about how we treated you and why I didn't speak up, he said during our conversation. The truth is that I was raised to prioritize family loyalty over individual integrity, and I didn't have the courage to challenge that pattern when it mattered most. But watching the consequences of our choices has taught me that loyalty without honesty isn't actually loyalty at all. His insight impressed me, and after several additional conversations, I offered him a position as Streamline AI's Associate General Counsel, focusing on intellectual property and employment law. His family name had become associated with betrayal and calculation, but his individual commitment to ethical behavior seemed genuine, and his legal skills were exactly what our growing company needed. The decision to hire Michael created some internal controversy within Streamline AI, with several employees questioning whether I could trust someone whose family had orchestrated such a devastating betrayal. Carlos Martinez, my longtime business development partner, was particularly skeptical about the decision. I understand the desire to forgive, but bringing him into the company creates risks we don't need to take, Carlos argued during one of our leadership team meetings. His family destroyed your marriage and tried to steal your wealth. How can we be sure he won't follow their example if it becomes advantageous? His concerns were reasonable, But my interactions with Michael had convinced me that his remorse was genuine and his commitment to ethical behavior was sincere. More importantly, his understanding of both law and technology made him uniquely qualified to help Streamline AI navigate the complex legal challenges that came with our rapid growth and international expansion. People shouldn't be condemned forever for their family's mistakes, especially when they're working actively to make better choices, I explained to the leadership team. Michael's legal expertise is exactly what we need, and his personal experience with the consequences of unethical behavior makes him less likely to repeat those mistakes. The decision proved correct as Michael's work ethic and legal acumen quickly established him as one of our most valuable team members. His handling of international contract negotiations and intellectual property protection strategies had been exemplary, and his commitment to transparent communication had helped rebuild trust with colleagues who had initially been skeptical about his hiring. The broader impact of my story had extended far beyond personal vindication or business success. Academic researchers had begun studying the Kim family case as an example of how traditional gender roles and social expectations could create environments where women's professional achievements were systematically undermined by family members, who appeared supportive while actually calculating how to exploit their success. Dr. Rachel Morrison, a sociologist at the University of Texas who specialized in gender and entrepreneurship, had published a paper analyzing the patterns revealed in my divorce proceedings. Her research identified what she termed strategic dismissal, a phenomenon where family members consistently minimize women's professional achievements while simultaneously positioning themselves to benefit financially from those same achievements. The Rodriguez-Kim case illustrates a complex form of gender-based economic exploitation that occurs within family structures, Dr. Morrison explained in her research. The victim's professional capabilities are systematically undermined through condescension and dismissiveness, while the exploiters simultaneously gather information and make strategic plans to appropriate the financial benefits of her work. Her analysis had resonated with women's rights organizations and business advocacy groups, leading to new educational programs designed to help female entrepreneurs recognize and protect themselves from family-based exploitation. The National Women's Business Center had developed workshops specifically addressing how to maintain professional boundaries with family members who might have ulterior motives regarding successful women's businesses. The personal healing process had been more complex than the professional vindication. While the public exposure of the Kim family's betrayal had provided satisfying justice, rebuilding my emotional life after such devastating personal betrayal required significant time and therapeutic support. The counselor I worked with specialized in helping successful women navigate relationship trauma that was complicated by wealth and professional achievement. Your situation is particularly challenging because the betrayal was both personal and financial, Dr. Jennifer Walsh explained during one of our sessions. Your husband and his family weren't just planning to end your marriage, they were strategically calculating how to maximize their financial benefit from the business you built while they dismissed your capabilities. The therapeutic process had helped me understand that the Kim family's behavior reflected their own insecurities and limitations, rather than any deficiency in my character or achievements. Their inability to appreciate innovation and technical expertise had blinded them to the value I was creating, while their obsession with traditional social status had prevented them from recognizing that economic landscapes were changing in ways that made their old assumptions obsolete. 2 years after the IPO and divorce, I had begun dating again. Though the experience of being a billionaire technology CEO presented unique challenges in forming genuine romantic connections. The men I met through professional networks often seemed more interested in my wealth and status than in my personality or interests, while men from outside the technology industry sometimes felt intimidated by my achievements and public profile. The relationship that developed most naturally was with Dr. James Kim, a professor of artificial intelligence at Stanford University, who had been consulting for Streamline AI on our machine learning initiatives. Despite sharing a surname with My ex-husband's family, James, was Korean American with no connection to the Texas Kims, and his academic background gave him both intellectual confidence and genuine appreciation for technical innovation. I have to admit, I was curious about dating someone whose story I'd read about in Forbes. He told me during one of our early dinners in Palo Alto. But what impressed me most was reading your actual research papers on workflow optimization algorithms. Most people focus on the business success story, but the technical innovation is what really demonstrates your capabilities. His ability to appreciate both my professional achievements and personal character without being intimidated or opportunistic felt refreshingly authentic after years of dealing with people who had ulterior motives regarding my success. Our relationship developed slowly and carefully, with both of us being cautious about mixing personal feelings with professional collaboration. The anniversary of Streamline AI's IPO provided an opportunity to reflect on how completely my life had been transformed by the events of that December morning when Patricia's champagne glass shattered against her marble floor. The company had exceeded every growth projection. My personal wealth had continued increasing as our stock price appreciated, and the personal vindication of exposing the Kim family's betrayal had provided closure that allowed me to move forward with confidence and optimism. The annual shareholders meeting that commemorated our second year as a public company drew over 300 attendees, including institutional investors, industry analysts, and business journalists, who continued, following Streamline AI's progress. My opening remarks focused on the company's achievements and future growth prospects, but I concluded with personal reflections on the journey that had brought us to this point. 2 years ago, there were people who dismissed Streamline AI as a computer hobby that might eventually make some money, I told the audience. Today, we're a $3 billion company that serves nearly 1,000 businesses across 4 continents. The lesson isn't just about the importance of believing in innovative ideas, but also about protecting your work from people who would exploit your achievements while undermining your confidence. The response was enthusiastic, with sustained applause that reflected not just appreciation for Streamline AI's financial success, but also recognition of the broader story about perseverance, innovation, and justice that had captured global attention. Several audience members approached me afterward to share their own experiences with family members or business partners who had attempted to appropriate their professional achievements. As I drove home to my new house in the hills west of Austin, I reflected on the strange turns that life could take and the unexpected ways that betrayal could become the catalyst for greater success and personal growth. The Kim family had intended to exploit my achievements while discarding me when convenient, but their betrayal had ultimately freed me from relationships that were constraining my potential and exposed their deception in ways that provided both personal vindication and professional advantages. The computer girl they had dismissed for so many years had become a billionaire technology leader whose story inspired women around the world to protect their achievements and demand respect for their capabilities. Their most devastating miscalculation hadn't just been underestimating my business acumen or my willingness to fight back. It had been failing to recognize that their betrayal would become the catalyst for achievements that exceeded even my own most ambitious expectations. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.